The question is, what does Judge McAfee's dismissal of those 6 counts mean for Fani Willis and the disqualification issue that is still left in his courtroom? We are going to go through some brief analysis. I've got some different options on how I think this could play out, and we'll also hear from Judge McAfee himself. He made an appearance, his first campaign radio appearance, I think this is his first campaign ever, on the Shelley Wynter Show, where he explains more about his background, more about his kids, and why his opinion is going to stay on point, in line with his integrity, not in line with the political circus that's going on outside of his court. We've got reaction from CNN and from Alina coming up on what happened in Georgia with this dismissal. But let's talk about how this could possibly go. So many different theories. Does this mean anything? McAfee dismissed 6 counts, gone. One of the big concerns that I've seen is that this is just a token victory. First possibility here. It's a token victory. Judge McAfee's throwing a bone to the defense, saying, I'm going to give you a dismissal on these 6 counts because I know Fani Willis is going to stay here. Case is not going to be dismissed, and Fani is not going to be disqualified. Could be a possibility. Now, if that did happen, we've got some other things that we can talk about, and we ask ourselves, what could happen if Fani is not dismissed? Couple options. One, we have a question now. Would Fani re-indict on those 6 charges? Of course, that's going to delay the case a lot further. Their whole goal behind all of this was to get Trump indicted before J6, before November, and before the election in 2024. That's the J6 case, the Florida case. Both those are off the rails. They called in Fani Willis. They called in Alvin Bragg. They said, accelerate your cases. Fani, we need him indicted on Monday. She got the job done. So this would delay that. The other option would be Fani would just forego the re-indictment on those charges and just continue with this case without those charges to see if even she can get a conviction if she stays on the case. What would the other remedies be? Fani could get disbarred by the state bar. That would take her off the case, Nathan Wade. Those processes would probably take years, right? So that would be, I think, something that would not necessarily impact the case. She would return and she would say that there was no disqualification, there was no dismissal. So she would point to the judge and his rulings as saying that she did not commit any misconduct and she should not be disbarred or even sanctioned. If there is an election, Fani may not win re-election, but again, that possibility may not happen if she stays on the case before the election. If the whole goal is to get the election completed before 2024, if she is not re-elected, she might still be in office while this case is pending and even closed. So we have other questions here. What about presidential immunity and the appellate combo? This has been an issue we've been following for some time. This is still a tool that Trump has not pulled out yet in this case. He just pulled it out in the Alvin Bragg case, saying, I have presidential immunity. That's step 1. Step 2, court says, no, you don't. Step 3 is appeal, which automatically results in a stay of the lower proceedings. So that would still be a recourse. And of course, this is another thing that just happened today. In fact, Governor Kemp was signing this new bill into law.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let me just thank you guys for being with us today. Marty and I are proud to be with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, Speaker John Burns, a lot of leadership from both chambers of the General Assembly and behind bars due to lack of professional conduct. When out of touch prosecutors put politics over public safety, the community suffers and people and property are put at risk. Today we are renewing our commitment that we won't forfeit public safety for prosecutors who let criminals off the hook. Georgians deserve better, and they deserve to feel safe in their own communities. So again, I want to thank Senator Robertson, President Pro Tem Kennedy, Leaders Gooch and F. Strachan, and Representative Gullett and Gaines for their work on this legislation and seeing it through the finish line. And with that, I'll ask all
right, so they have now passed this council. That council, if Fani stays on, might be something that could take her back off if that is the case. Now, I don't think that this is a likely option, right? We got the bad news out of the way first. I think that Fani is going to get disqualified. The question is, will the case also be dismissed as well? So if that is one possibility, this dismissal of the 6 counts could have been just a token defense victory. It's a small victory in a battle, knowing that we might lose the war later on. Option 1. I'm hopeful that is not the case, and I do not think it will be, but one possibility. Another one. This could be a warning for Fani, right? This ruling is now saying, Fani, we know that this case is pretty problematic, and it's just a precursor to disqualifying her. So in other words, the judge is cleaning up this case for the next DA who's going to come in. The new DA is going to want a clean slate. They're going to want to move with this quickly. This was an issue that was already pending, and so the judge is not intending to dismiss the case, but he's just intending to clean this up before he passes it off to the new prosecutor. And of course, these rulings need to be made because the motions were submitted by the defense. So he's just following the motions and issuing the rulings. So that could be a possibility. Now, the reason why that might be problematic, or why that justification at least may not make a lot of logical sense, is because the new DA is going to have to consider what to do about this. In my opinion, the new DA is going to see this case and think it is a disaster. So the cleaning up by the judge is not ultimately going to lead to something that is useful or really has any utility, because I think the new DA is going to want to go through this with a fine-tooth comb anyways and investigate what Fani and Wade did, if they did anything. In other words, I think they're going to get an empty manila folder, right? It's going to be mostly garbage. And so you can't do much with garbage if you're a competent prosecutor. So point is, right, one option would be McAfee's trying to clean this up, and the new DA, if they get this case, they're still going to have to consider whether to re-indict on those 6 charges. And again, they're going to have to consider the sufficiency of the original indictment itself. Now, the last option could be that what Judge McAfee is doing is knocking the legs out of the table. Table's got 4 legs on it. He's just knocked one of them out, providing cover for the ultimate disqualification and dismissal. In other words, he's dismissing evidence or dismissing charges, showing that this case is not bad only because of their conflict and their perjury, but it's also bad because they don't even know how to indict people, okay? Like, these 6 counts have to go because it's constitutionally vague. We don't even know what the charges are. So that's just one leg of the 4 on the table that he knocks out. The other is going to be coming soon. He's going to disqualify Fani and Fulton County and then ultimately dismiss the case. Now, Fani would then appeal that. And also, if he lays these both down, right, Fani might be appealing both issues. If we think about the appellate layer to this too, that adds a whole layer of complexity, because I think both sides will be appealing. If judge does not disqualify Fani, they'll appeal. If she does get disqualified or the case does get dismissed, Fani will appeal. And let's think about it logically. So if Fani gets disqualified, then Fani would come back, have to appeal the disqualification. And then when that is rectified, then she's got to fix the deficiency in the indictment. And there is no way that happens before the election. Absolutely no way. So the indictment adds another layer of analysis and some more complexity to this. Now, the right legal answer, I think in the court of law and in the court of public opinion on all of the issues, is disqualification is appropriate and dismissal is appropriate, because the misconduct that was committed by these prosecutors went all the way back to the original indictment. Their affair started in 2019 before the appointment of Nathan Wade. He got appointed on November 1st, divorced his wife November 2nd because he was already indicting Fani. They had a relationship well before all this started. So, and in addition to that, they lied to the court, which, again, the only sanction that you can properly pursue against a prosecutor is dismissal. You can sanction them, you can fine them, but it's the government. It's just government money. So the real remedy is a dismissal, and a dismissal on this would be a big one. So here is what Judge McAfee sounded like. He went on the Shelley Wynter Show, and he was asked about a lot of these issues. And let's listen in and see what he said, because he is now campaigning. And of course, if you're in Georgia and you like what you're hearing for Judge McAfee, well, you know, you might be able to support him in his campaign, because he's going to be fighting a very, very serious uphill battle. Here is what his interview sounded like from the Shelley Wynter Show.
Yeah, absolutely. They can get on board at keepjudgemcafee.com. And so if anyone cares about our criminal justice system and making it better for everyone involved here in Fulton County, I'd ask for them to take a look, to join us. I'd ask for their vote and for their support.
You were handpicked and selected and put in that position by Governor Brian Kemp. So this is your first election that you've ever run, or have you been in other elections before?
No, this is the first time.
Last night I had which is now, I guess, your challenger, Robert Patillo, on, and one of the things that he talked about why he's running is because of the backlog of cases that he says the judges can help out. Criticize the fact that this case, this what we call election interference case with Donald Trump and 18 others, has moved through the courts very quickly, but there are people who are sitting in holding cells and in Fulton County Jail who have not seen a judge, and he's saying that's why he's running. What do you say to that?
Well, what I would say is that a lot of what he shared with you yesterday about efficiency, about getting everyone their timely day in court, I couldn't agree more with that. He's absolutely right about that, but he's coming after the wrong judge if that's what he really believes. And frankly, I've got the numbers to prove it. I mean, from day one, my job is to attack the backlog, and I've done that with everything I could, and it's working. I mean, I can tell you that I inherited a docket where I was second to last in terms of the number of pending cases. In 1 year, I'm now in the top half. I'm number 6. I had 53 different murder cases when I came on board. We're now down to 25.
That's a lot.
We had 25 defendants that had been sitting in jail for over 1,000 days. We're down to 10. So we have...
Those are great numbers. And honestly, I see the activity in his courtroom. I go there, I check it. I say, anything happened interesting here in McAfee's courtroom? He's got a bunch of other cases going on. He was just in a jury trial, right? So not only is he managing a monster 19 co-defendant RICO case with all of the filings and the pleadings and everything that's going on there, but he's also still conducting jury trials for murder cases. Like, it's a big deal. And he's handling a very, very grueling docket, and he's handling it very nicely from our perspective.
I've been attacking this backlog with everything I've got, and we've been just doing jury trial after jury trial. When you reached out to me yesterday, I just wrapped up another murder case. So all I can tell you is people maybe don't see all of the cases that I handled. Maybe one of them gets most of the attention, but the actual bread and butter of what we do and that's happening in 5A is exactly the type of work that he talked about and that I'm really proud of.
And was that your stated goal when you got put in that position by the governor, was to take care of the backlog and get people moving?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that has been one of the most continual frustrations of Fulton County. You know, you've got a case where a victim's family is just sitting there waiting to try and get some justice in the case. And on the other side, you've got a defendant who oftentimes just, again, wants his day in court, wants to tell his side of the story, and they're just sitting there waiting. And we've got to have a system that recognizes that and people willing to put in the work to make it better. And we've got the resources, we've got all the means in Fulton County to make that happen. It's just a matter of knowing how a courtroom works, having spent a career in a courtroom, and knowing how to move those cases along, and that's exactly what I've done.
One of the other criticisms that Mr. Patillo logged last night was the fact that many judges come from the prosecution side. And
that's
so
true.
As a defendant, you're up against two prosecutors in effect. What do you say to that?
Yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen a lot of judges who were prosecutors and not as nearly as many who are defense attorneys. You know, defense attorneys kind of go private sector, and the prosecutor hierarchy, you know, you become a prosecutor, you go there for 10 years, get your student loans taken out, then you decide you're going to, level up, you become a judge, you have multiple rotations, and that's kind of your career path. But a defense attorney's not, right? Defense attorneys kind of go into private practice and spend their whole lives there. So we see a lot of prosecutor and prosecuting judges, and I've seen, in my opinion, it always feels like the judges are biased against the defense. I think there's an institutional bias against the defense. But I have also seen judges who were prosecutors, I would feel, just anecdotally, would overcompensate for their prior careers as a prosecutor. You know what I mean? Like they would almost give the defense a little bit more grace by default because they knew that a stark criticism against them was that they were a prosecutor. So in other words, they would be, fair, whether it was natural or they would give the defense a handicap to give over, because of their prior careers, who knows? But you can still see fair judges even despite that background.
Certainly he's right that a lot of judges do start out as prosecutors. I certainly spent plenty of time as a state and federal prosecutor. And a lot of what that job is, prosecutor's job that's done well, is almost quasi-judicial because you're not just looking out for your own case. You're not winning at any cost. It's about justice over conviction.
Okay, we'll be nice to Judge McAfee because that's the right standard, but that's not what many prosecutors believe in their hearts. Many prosecutors, like Fani and others, are about convictions first and foremost. And I've met many prosecutors that don't care. I've shown them evidence right in their faces, and they just, my cop says differently. I go, your cop's a liar! And they, whatever, right? They're just moving through cases, moving through numbers. They got a big, backlog, and they don't really care. They just want convictions, and that's it. So, this judge is giving a political answer, and honestly, it's kind of a shame that he's got to explain himself in this way, because he's facing, I think, a purely political attack from the left. Nobody was running against this guy until Fani got outed as having an indictment with her lover. Then we better get a candidate up there, right, to put some pressure on this to not disqualify her. Came out of nowhere. It's a political attack, obviously. So he has to explain his prosecutorial background to a very, very blue county who probably don't like prosecutors all that much,
So oftentimes as a prosecutor, I was looking after the defendant's case because I didn't want it to get overturned on appeal. So that mindset as a prosecutor,
good
like
answer.
I said, it's very similar in some respects to what you're doing as a judge. So that transition from a prosecutor to a judge, the right kind of prosecutor, is one that I think is very much speaks to what a judge is supposed to do in terms of seeing the bigger picture. And it's one I've tried to apply in every case in terms of approaching a case from a perspective of allowing both sides a fair day in court. So I certainly think he's entitled to that perspective. But when you actually look at the work I've done, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any attorney who's tried a case in my courtroom who didn't think they got a fair day in court.
We're on the phone with Judge Scott McAfee,
I think that's
Fulton
fair.
County Superior Court judge, and has a challenge for his election, and that election is in May 21st. Let's go a little bit to the big election interference case. I do have to ask you this question. Do you feel that Patillo's run is being backed by Fani Willis, which a lot of people on my
Yes.
side of the fence and a lot of people I've spoken to feel that this is a pressure campaign
Yes.
to force you to, and I'm doing air quotes, do the right thing or make the right decision? Do you feel that way?
No, I couldn't tell you that. And I haven't met him. I haven't seen him around the courthouse. And like I said, I think he seems sincere. So I'm not the type that I'm going to presume the worst of that sort. And
What a
I'm
nice
not one to
judge.
jump at conspiracy theories like that. And the biggest thing that I wanted to come on and make
Not a
sure I told
conspiracy
you
theory.
today that even if it is, it doesn't matter because it is absolutely not going to play into my decision in any way. No job is worth my integrity.
Boom.
And, when you ask that question, what I think about is, I've got two kids, 5 and 3. They're too young to have any idea of what's going on or what I do. But what I'm looking forward to one day is maybe they will grow up a little bit and they ask me about it. And I'm looking forward to looking them in the eye and telling them I played it straight and I did the best I could.
Wow, it's a strong answer right there. And know it's true. So on that say, can you tell us?
And again, we're asking ourselves about the court of law and the court of public opinion, right? This guy is a judge. He wants a career as a judge. He's doing the job of a judge. The job of a judge is a sacred position. You know, it doesn't work without a good judge. And the judge, big part of their duty is to keep decorum in the courtroom. And if you have people lying to you, committing perjury, committing felonies in your own courtroom, that's a whole different justice system that we have here. If Fani and Wade can get away with that and Terrence Bradley can get away with this, that is so beneath our justice system, and it's beneath the integrity of what he signed up to do, right? It's a sacred honor to be a judge. You send people to prison for a long time, if not the rest of their lives. It's a very powerful, position, and so we need people who take it seriously, and he sounds like the type of guy who does.
So I have got to ask this question also. Can you tell us, are you any close or anywhere closer to that 2-week decision on the election interference? Are we closer to that? Are we sooner than 2 weeks or outside of 2 weeks? How are we looking?
I gave myself a deadline because I knew everyone wanted an answer. And I'll tell you, an order like this takes time to write. There's a lot that I have to go through. And so, again, I'll emphasize this. I've had a rough draft and an outline before I ever heard a rumor that someone wanted to run for this position. So the result is not going to change because of politics.
Results are not going to change. So the outline has been drafted for some time, and we know that guy, Robert Patillo, just announced pretty quickly after the closing arguments. So he may have already had that started outline before those closing arguments were even completed. So what does he have in mind?
I'm calling it as best I can in the law as I understand it. So I still feel like I'm on track to having that done by the deadline that I put on myself.
Today, the news broke that the
Friday,
Fulton
we're
County
waiting
Commission,
for it.
Dropped any ethics hearings with against DA Fani Willis because she's a constitutional officer. That was one of the arguments waged by the defendants when you had the hearings. Does that change anything based on your outline and, what you've been thinking about in your decision?
Well, Shelley, unfortunately, I think that's where we start dipping into that realm of commenting on a pending case.
No problem.
So those judicial ethics prevent me from doing that, but maybe we can sit down many years from now and have another conversation about it.
No problem. I had to ask.
All right. So great interview from Judge McAfee, and that came over from the Shelley Wynter Show, a local Georgia radio show. And I thought it was a great interview. I mean, he seems like a very stand-up guy. I like that he was talking about his kids. I like he was talking about, the efficiency of the court and how he's doing a good job to work through it. And it does require a judge to work through it, right? There are different types of judges, just like in any profession. You might show up to, a doctor's office and it's run in total disarray. Everybody's late. Appointments are behind schedule. Doctors, shows up late, not prepared. Who are you? Why are you here? Whatever. Or you might, have a well-tuned, finely tuned machine. You go in, out, you're like, dang, they knew everything. Do judges read their briefs before they show up? Are they prepared to go? Do they know the case law better than the lawyers? And can they manage the courtroom? Judge McAfee certainly can. Now he is being challenged by a pressure campaign from the left to try to get him out of office or to get him to correct what they think is an injustice brought against Fani Willis. But Fani Willis is an embarrassing lawyer. She's been embarrassing for a long time. Now more people are seeing it, including CNN. Elie Honig was asked about this, and on the radio on CNN, he was commenting about how much of a mistake this is out of Fani's office.
Trump and Brad Raffensperger, where Trump asks him to just find 11,780 votes. We've all heard it many times. That is still part of the case. That phone call is still part of the case. There are other charges in the case that squarely relate to that phone call. For example, the first count in the indictment, which is the very broad racketeering count,
RICO,
will still include that conduct. There are other fraud counts that would still include that conduct. So I don't think this ruling changes the type of evidence that the DA is going to be able to introduce, but it does knock out some of the charges. And look, it's embarrassing for prosecutors.
Yeah.
It's a screw up by prosecutors when you bring a charge and then a judge throws it out before it even goes to trial.
Well, and that leads me to this question, Elie, because there was so much was made of Fani Willis and her handling of this case, and the hearings that we saw play out on live television was such a spectacle. Does this bolster in the judge's mind the idea that perhaps the Fani Willis should not be handling this case, or is that a step too far?
It should not bolster the conflict of interest argument. I think these are and should be seen as two entirely separate questions. The question in the decision that we just got is the indictment properly constructed? Were these charges properly put before the grand jury, and are they sustainable? And the judge said, with respect to 6 of the charges in this case, again, not all of them, but just 6, no, they were not properly brought. There is an entirely separate question pending where we're waiting for a ruling any day now, where the judge has to decide whether the DA has a financial or other conflict of interest relating to her relationship with the outside person brought in to be the lead prosecutor. prosecutor here, Nathan Wade. Those should be completely different questions and completely different considerations by the judge.
I think that's probably right. I think he's probably going to consider them separately, but you can weigh into them. You can, I think, read into them some propensity, right? He's okay dismissing charges against Fani, that's for sure. Is he willing to dismiss the case is another issue. Now we finish our segment with Alina Habba. She showed up on Fox. She had a nice interview and she was explaining some reaction to what's happening in Georgia. Here she is.
What's your reaction to what happened today in Georgia?
I wish that all the counts had been dropped because that's probably what should have been. I mean, at least it was a step in the right direction. It goes to the sloppiness of, frankly, the prosecutors down there. We know that that's the case. And more importantly, that this should not have been brought in general. The attorney handling this case put out a statement that I think says it all. You know, at the end of the day, remember, we've got a prosecutor here who's currently being questioned about her own ethical obligations, her ability to even stay on this case. I'm going to defer to this judge to make the right decision, but today was a good step in the right direction.
What do you think it means for whether or not he will decide to remove Fani Willis from this case? What does your gut tell you on this, Alina?
Fani's gone.
I don't think it's indicative necessarily of his actions in terms of Fani. I think that Fani, whatever she calls herself, she's got her own issues that are outside of this case that clearly have permeated her decision-making ability. And as I've always said, as my clients always said, we know that these were motivated by one thing and one thing only, and that's election interference that's trying to bring Trump down. And on the heels of last night, I think that it's very clear that the American people are seeing it for what it is and are going to stand up and not take it very much.
I want to get your thoughts, even though you're not directly involved in this. You're part of the larger legal team representing the former president. But the first case that is set to go to trial is in New York City here on March 25th under Judge Merchan. And it deals with the hush money that was paid to Stormy Daniels. That's what the charge is in this case, and that it was diverted in the way that it was paid through legal fees. Do you think that case is going to get underway on March 25th? And how does the former president feel about this one that is likely to happen before, you know, right in the middle of the election season?
Yeah, it's coming up. And Trump and we covered this recently, just trying the immunity combo where he says, I'm immune, judge says you're not, then appeals it, and the appeal stays the lower proceedings. So that is already underway right now.
It's a couple of good questions there. Number one, do I think it's going to go ahead? Well, really, it shouldn't. We have an immunity defense that's currently up on the Supreme Court. It's going to be made a decision. It should be stayed until all of those decisions are made, number one, and we'll see what happens there. Number two, let's remember what this is, Martha. Stormy Daniels is probably one of the oldest legendary let's get Trump cases that we saw come out. Her attorney, I believe, is in prison or was probably disbarred. Michael Cohen, yet again, reared his ugly head in that. And here we go, years and years later, they decide, oh, guess what? He's the GOP nominee. Let's bring up this case again. We have Mark Pomerantz, who was in this case involved, wrote a book about how they didn't bring the case against President Trump, and it infuriated him and drove him to the point of quitting. This is all about politics. How does the president feel? I think exactly that way. This is political. There's no place for this in America. DAs and AGs should not be visiting the White House and the administration before bringing complaints against the leading front-running candidate for the Republican Party because Joe Biden can't walk and can't spell Bob backwards. That's not our problem. That's their problem. But it's very clear what the motivation is. And I think the president's frustrated for the nation and ready to get back to work in November.
Nice job, Alina Habba in the house. And so, my friends, of course, we are going to be here patiently waiting to see what Judge McAfee does in the RICO case as he continues to write his ruling. And we're going to be here covering it, not only this case, but the rest of the Trump litigation that is currently underway. And we've got New York coming up. We've got Florida updates. There is oral arguments in Florida tomorrow. So we're going to be here covering it all. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing our channel with a friend or family member, inviting them on over here to see what's really happening in these cases. Of course, we also invite you to check out some of the links down in the description below. Any PDFs and our daily newsletter is available at robertgovea.com. We have great events at watcherlodge.com. Come and join us. We'd love to see you this Saturday, absolutely all free. We also have watchingthewatchers.locals.com, our members-only community, where we do streams in the morning and on Saturday, and we'd love to see you there. And of course, right back here on the next one.